is we get two authors that might or might not know about each other. We talk about the good, the bad, and the creative process. But before anything else, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Charisse Aquino Tugade, and I am the Executive Director of the National Book Development Board. So today, aside from our program, it is quite an exciting month, actually, because we are celebrating so many things. Aside from our 12th Philippine International Literary Festival, we have, it's actually National Literature Month, and we're also celebrating the quincentennial anniversary and also World Art Deco Month. So before we start our program, I would like to introduce you to two of our favorite authors for this program. Our first author is Ivan Mandy. Ivan, come on down. Where are you, Ivan? Okay, so Ivan Mandy is the founder of Old Manila Walks, a specialist outfit that operates interpretive tours around the city's old neighborhood. Since 1999, he's worked in the heritage field as a researcher, tour specialist, events organizer, and a writer, contributing articles to various publications and producing Deco Filipino, Art Deco Heritage in the Philippines in 2020. Which is currently the most comprehensive documentation of the architecture and allied arts of the country from 1925 to 1950. Ivan is also a trustee of the Heritage Conservation Society and the Museum Foundation of the Philippines, and is currently writing his next book, so watch out for that. How are you, Ivan?
I'm good.
Yay.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. We're so excited to have you. Okay, our next author who we'd like to feature is Paolo Herras, and you actually might have remembered him from last week. He was with us. So Paolo Herras is the 2017 National Book Award finalist for the graphic novel Strange Natives. He's the comic book author of Buhay Habang Buhay, which he also directed as a full-length film in 2016. Cine Filipino Film Festival. Paolo is also the author of the graphic novels Sumpa, Noodle Boy, and two Alamat ng Matibay children's books. He's the president and co-founder of Komiket, a nonprofit organization that aims to nurture and grow the Filipino comics community, the festival director of the Philippine International Comics Festival, and the lead lecturer of the annual Comic Book Creators Workshop, and an award-winning advertising creative. So without further ado, we will start, but we're going to make things a little bit more exciting for everyone. So we're going to start with the lightning round. And the premise of this Get to Know You lightning round is we will flash a screen with a question, and each author has 15 seconds to answer the question. We have not shown these questions before, so let's see what happens. Are we ready, guys?
Yeah.
Yay! All right. I will see you later.
Okay, so let me begin. My last book was, well, it's Deco Filipino, which is all about Art Deco heritage in the country. And you, Paolo?
My last book, I guess, is my last Strange Natives. So that's it's published in 2016, and I'm working on the next book and finishing the series.
All right. Okay, next question. Favorite literary character? Who's yours, Paolo?
Oh gosh, my favorite literary character might still be Bilbo Baggins of Lord of the Rings. Or no, yeah, or I really love Obelix and Asterix and Obelix too. So, yep, Bilbo Baggins or Obelix.
Right. Well, I can think of one. Yeah, I don't have any favorite literary character actually. I have favorite book authors. Okay, yeah.
Okay, the next question, your ideal writing setup.
Well, my ideal writing setup would be wherein I have all the materials that I need to write. And then I can just open it, close it, and just refer to it as I do my writing. So I have to have everything in front of me, ideally.
My ideal writing setup is going to Baguio City and writing and drinking coffee at Oh My Gulay. So it's on session
Right.
floor. And I usually travel there once or twice a year to write. All of my screenplays are written there.
In Oh My Gulay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So Baguio really means a lot to you.
Yes. But,
Ah,
any mountain for that matter. So I came from I studied for a year in Philippine Institute for the Arts. So Mount Makiling is
right.
special to me.
Okay. So name your top 3 artists who influenced your work.
Okay, mine is Jerry Alangilan.
Okay.
Great. This is Rodsky Potocki and Where Bold Stars Go to Die. I can't find his Wasted, but he also did Elmer.
Right.
One is my mentor, and that's Ricky Lee.
Okay.
His book on the screenplay,
Right.
and his children's book. This is kung alam nyo lang. And my favorite film is Moral. So
I
that's
see.
my third would be Gabriel Garcia Marquez. So I've been reading him since college,
Mhm.
and I really love his work.
Right. Well, mine would be, since I'm in the heritage field, the late heritage advocate and writer Toti Villalon, as well as the books that were done by Hilda Cordero Fernando, the Filipiniana books that were done, because she was a pioneering publisher in the 70s, and I have most of her books relating to Filipino culture. In fact, I actually treasure her books. So okay, so let's move on to the next question. Your most overused word or phrase,
What's yours?
as well as when I write. It's more of an extender. So yeah. And yours?
It would be
Okay. That's for speaking, but what about for writing?
yeah, it would be for me trying to organize my thoughts and having that sound to until I get to bridge me from one thought to another, because my thoughts kind of jump around. So
Yeah. So you have to link them, right?
you should
So
change it from to
okay. I think everybody does that. So what drew you to writing?
Well, for me, I read a lot as a kid, and I read a lot of books that, of course, that were available in my house and in the school library. So I started with Asterix and Obelix and Hardy Boys, and then eventually I started to write my own, and that's how I got to to writing. And then I formally studied creative writing at the Philippine Institute for the Arts, where I was there for a
Okay.
year. And then I took up comparative literature. So I guess it's that journey into
So,
writing.
so you had a formal background, because I did not. Well, basically, like you, I grew up reading Archie comic books, very American, Hardy Boys, and when I was in high school, I started getting into Filipiniana books on heritage and culture. I don't have any formal background on writing, but my sister, my eldest sister, who I'm very close with, she used to write for a national broadsheet as a lifestyle writer. So I began writing in a community paper, and then eventually started contributing to broadsheets. And then it just started there. I have a degree on industrial design, so it's not writing at all. But yeah, it just came out, I guess. Your ultimate Pinoy idol. Hmm.
Who's yours? I mean, what does Pinoy idol mean? Is that a singer or is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Me, I mean, being the heritage field, I looked up to, again, the late heritage advocate, Augusto Totti Villalon, because I used to read his columns at the Inquirer, and somehow, I mean, what he was writing on heritage and, culture and, all that advocacy rubbed on to me. And I began my career in the heritage field partly because of his writings back when I was in high school.
Um, for me, I guess it would still be Ricky Lee. I was very blessed to have him as a mentor when I was fourth year high school. Uh,
Wow.
I I trained under him from
Mhm.
at his script writing workshop. So I was the
Okay.
youngest in a batch of I think 40 people who wanted to learn how to write for film and TV, and that was my shift from writing short stories and plays into film and TV. And what I do love about him is not only is he building his own community
Mhm.
of script writers, but he teaches and he shares his knowledge, and that kind of what inspired me to also teach and share
Yeah.
everything I learned from my creative journey.
Right. Come to think of it, I never had a mentor for writing. Maybe I should get one. Okay, so if you had to read the same book for the rest of your life, what would it be?
You want to start on that?
um, well, any book that relates to my interest, I suppose. I can't give a straight answer on it, but this whole series on Philippine history called Kasaysayan, which I have on my back over there. I like reading that from time to time. I mean, if I like to geek about history, and it's like 12 volumes. I can always pick one volume and then read it and just enjoy.
um, I guess my book, of course, the one that comes to mind is what are the books that help me along the way, and when I was taking up a folk literature class when I was
Mhm.
studying in UP, what my one of my taught by one of my favorite teachers, Professor Rosella Torrecampo, and she mentioned that if you read the Bible and the Greek mythology, that's around 70-80% of all of the symbols in the world, and that's of course because of a lot of political reasons. But
Right.
since
Mhm.
those two, that was a good foundation for me when I write. It's
Right.
especially use symbols. So I guess those two I would read over and over again.
Yeah. Speaking of Greek mythology, I read that little black book by that Greek mythology classic by Edith something. I forgot her name. You probably read it too. Okay.
Okay,
So what is your
we're all-
most prized book in your collection?
I guess mine. I have.
Edith Hamilton. There. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. What
Yeah. No,
what
it's okay. Yeah. Go on. Please proceed.
um I guess I have a copy of Alex Nino's book, which is I think the most expensive book I have here. But
Mhm.
I do have a relatively sizable amount of Filipiniana books. And like one example is Ricky Lee's Moral. But I have a
Okay.
copy of Tita Lacambra Ayala's Pieces of String. I'm very fond of Filipino writers, women writers. Uh,
Mm,
my major was in Philippine literature in English, uh,
okay.
and we have a lot of really great women writers.
Okay. Well, for me, I think there's none in particular because I started collecting books, but back when I was in Filipiniana books when I was in high school. But one of the most memorable books that I bought when I was in high school was a book on Spanish colonial churches. And when I brought it in 1997, I brought it for 7,500 pesos, which was a very expensive book for a high school student. So I had to, yeah, so I had to really save up for that. I mean, it's still there. It was published in, it's called Philippine Churches. It was published in 1979. It's this huge coffee table book that I still have it today, 20 plus years on. Yeah, it's not a surprise anymore, but you know, it just reminds me of a time when I was really into that topic, and I would really save and spend money for it. Okay, so agree. Yeah, next question. Can you read it, Pao? Because it's small kasi.
Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work. And the belief that things will grow out of the activity itself and that you will, through work, bump into other possibilities and kick open other doors that you would never have dreamt of it. You were just sitting around looking for a great art idea. So do you agree or disagree?
Agree.
I disagree.
Okay.
I disagree that inspiration is for amateurs because we are inspired every single day, every
Okay.
moment, and we just don't see it or don't appreciate it or don't see that it is inspiration. So
Right.
we get our creativity from what we experience in every day. I mean, what we do is a mirror of our lives or our
Right.
time. And that's why art and literature is called humanity or the humanity because
Right.
it's a reflection of our everyday.
Right.
So if you
Well,
don't see it as inspiration, then you're uninspired.
well, I agree with you on that. Okay, so that's the lighting round.
Okay, so it seems to be that was like a very interesting way to break the ice, and
Yeah.
and I have not met Ivan since this opportunity. So I'd like us to get to know more about each other, and I think we were both asked to share um our inspiration through 5 images. I think I shared
Okay.
5, but yeah, let's start with yours.
Okay. So I'm sharing to you the books that I have read during this past ECQ. You know, being stuck at home gave me a lot of chance to dig through a lot of my collections. Um, Books that I have bought and have probably not read. My taste with books tend to be focused on a lot more, well, with Filipiniana books anyways now, tend to be a lot on history, specifically urban history, social history, political history, as well as ethnic history. So my current reading includes a book on Baguio. It's not just a basic history of Baguio. It's actually a PhD thesis turned into a book, and it explores how the whole American colonial bureaucracy and system was applied in Baguio. No, so it takes out a lot of these romantic notions that we have of that city on top of a mountain. It was written by a Filipino American. But the topic is about Baguio. And then I've been reading a book. Well, I read this book, a really nice book on Quezon City history, again, just last year, and books on about Metropolitan Manila and the Chinese community in the country. So these are my readings during ECQ. Okay.
The architecture of Leandro Locsin is the
Yeah.
Filipino arts featured there.
I think I saw a photo. Yeah, this is an old book. It was published in 1977. It's a coffee table book, and it basically lists down the works of Leandro Locsin. Because lately, I've been trying to read up a lot on brutalist heritage in the country. And brutalist, for those of you who do not know, is it's an architecture that uses raw concrete. It was very common during the Marcos era. So it's not yet seen as heritage, but at least for our generation, but people are starting to talk about it as as it should be part of our built heritage. So yeah.
When I was studying at the Philippine Center for the Arts, our dormitories, our classrooms, our theater
Yes.
built by Locsin. So I was staying in. I was sleeping and studying
Okay.
and learning in the with under the roof of Locsin. So that's fantastic.
But did you know that it was Locsin? Did you appreciate the
Yes,
space, the
yes.
I mean, it being brutalist?
This well, when I came in, my senior I mean each of our batches were named after a national artist. So
Mm,
the batch that was my senior, because I came in at second year, and
mm,
the seniors back then was actually named Locsin. So
okay, okay.
and then that's of course you asked what did he do, and then he did all of the architecture and yeah, so that was it kind of slowly fed us to be or trained us to think about being an artist in our own country and not just
Right,
create beautiful
right.
beautiful words
Yeah,
and
the
pictures.
deeper aspect of it, the more profound aspects of it. I also like to read journals, journals on history and culture. So I can be a geek sometimes. Okay, so let me talk about the whole process of. Let me share to you the whole process of our book. Since this is all about the creative process of doing a book. No, I haven't done as many books as you have. My first and last major book was this title called Deco Filipino, which is basically a coffee table book that documents architecture and design between 1925 and 1950. So, the topic of Art Deco studies is very big overseas. And you have lots of books on this topic in North America, in Europe, and in parts of Asia. So here in the country, we have a heritage of Art Deco, but it's not really appreciated as much. So we thought we came up with a book. Actually, it's not the first book on the subject, because prior to that there have been literature that came out, and the last being this book to your left, which is called Art Deco in the Philippines. It was published in 2010 by Lourdes Montinola of Far Eastern University, and that was my inspiration. Because when I had that book, it partly opened my eyes on my I guess my fascination on the topic. And as the years went by, I got to learn more. I got to talk to more people. I thought, hey, you know what? This book is nice, but I think we can do something better. No, in the sense that I could do a book which is more encompassing in terms of documentation, which I eventually did in 2018. We can have the next slide. So what I did to do this book is that I went around the country to document buildings and structures and furniture which relate to that specific era, no, and that specific style. So I have this photo with me in Quezon province in Sariaya, and in my back is a beautiful Art Deco mansion, which unfortunately is abandoned. And then, if I'm lucky, I will have a photographer in tow. And this one's my photographer, Estan Cabigas, but he's not always there because we have other jobs to do. No, so sometimes I would just go around and document these buildings on my own. So from buildings to houses to commercial structures. Can we move on to the next slide? I went to places. I interviewed people, no, because a lot of the material that I wanted to put in the books were basic histories of each structure, of each building, and unfortunately, family histories, especially if you come from a small town, it's not easy to come by. in archival research. It's not always listed in the papers. And given these limitations, I had to do a lot of interviews, getting oral histories from descendants of the family. So here I'm doing interviews of a particular home in Bacolod and in San Juan, Batangas. No, so knowing about the family's history, what gave them the wealth to build these homes. No, because if you look at one thing that ties them up is that a lot of the buildings which were built during that period were really well, mostly, no, I won't say all, but mostly grand. And so we had to tell that story, where it came from. And that's where the oral history came in through interviews. And then I also went to from houses to, okay, let's move on to the next slide. Oh, so so documenting buildings, it's not just taking photos outside. It involves going to the very bones of the building. Like this one, it's actually on a roof in a house in Talisay, Negros Occidental. It looks adventurous, but it's actually very, very hot when I went there, because it was the height of summer. And then if you look at it, it's galvanized iron, because I wanted to see how the roof was made and if there are interesting details there. So I had to climb up. And it's part of the whole adventure. No, it's very, very hot, but you had to do it. I also went to, okay, let's move on to the next slide, to places that you probably wouldn't think of when doing a book, like cemeteries. Okay, so I went to a lot of cemeteries, most of it on my own, again, to document specimens of the Art Deco style in funerary architecture. So from tombs to mausoleums. Now, again, it sounds like one big adventure, but when you do it on your own, even in daytime in a cemetery, it kind of gets creepy. But it's also fun because you get to see a lot of these specimens. And when you see a specimen, it gets me excited. It's like, hey, you know what? Here's a new specimen that we can add. No, it just shows you the diversity of the application of this particular style. Okay, so and then after the documentation, I also did archival work a lot. No, next slide. That means doing research in institutions where we could get firsthand information on particular buildings and particular personalities that we were doing research on. And I find archival work to be very enjoyable because it's very quiet. And it's nice flipping through old magazines and old material of that era. Okay, so this is a photo of the process that we did in our book. So we had a team who would design the book, layout, and the usual stuff. And then, okay, let's move on. And then finally, in 2020, February, we were able to release our book. Fittingly, at the Rizal Sports Stadium in Malate, which is another Art Deco specimen. And I think we made history because we're the first book launch event in a sports stadium. And this is a very historic sports stadium since 1934. And that's my co-author, Dr. Gerard Lico from UP. And we were able to release it just before the whole COVID pandemic lockdown happened. So we were lucky in that aspect. So that's the whole process of our book. So what's yours, Paolo? Oh yeah, here's a video. Okay, well, okay, I forgot about this. Here's a video that I did, but somebody asked me to do. In
the 1920s and 30s was.
Okay, let's play the video.
The 1920s and 30s was a time of dramatic transformation in Manila. Emerging from a post-colonial hangover, the Philippine capital saw changes in dress, culture, architecture, industry, entertainment, even language. Manileños, now thriving under the sphere of Pax Americana, celebrated the splendor and glamour of that era at sultry cabaret clubs, beautiful new hotels, and at lavish events throughout the city. Notable among these splendid affairs was the annual Manila Carnival, an industrial, trade, and cultural fair that celebrated U.S.-Philippines relations. If music and dance was your pleasure, one would have swayed and waltzed to the music of Vic Hernandez and the Swing-sational at the legendary Santa Ana Cabaret. It was within this collective milieu that Art Deco thrived. This design movement originated at the 1925 Paris Exposition, a decorative art style characterized by decadent detail, geometry, and vibrant color. Introduced to Manila by foreign-educated Filipino architects, the city became an architectural canvas infused with its contemporary aesthetic, celebrating the times and spirit of the era. In so many ways, Art Deco manifested the modernist Manileño lifestyle, boldly expressing these beautiful forms of futurism and serving as backdrop to the gaiety of an era of spirited jazz and swing. The ornate Art Deco design philosophy was applied in the architecture of office buildings, houses, theaters, even sports stadiums. Deco was even integrated into everyday objects and accessories. Though those heady days are now long gone, one may steal glimpses of that golden time today through structures tucked away around the metro, waiting to be rediscovered anew.
Okay, so that's a video that I did for a gin company that relates to Art Deco. So basically, yeah, it's telling the history of our city through a particular design genre, through our book. So that's my story. So what's yours, Paolo?
That's a fantastic story, Ivan. I don't know what's my slide. Okay, so this is the cover study for Strange Natives. Next slide, please. So the process is usually me and the illustrator. In this case, it's the amazing Jericho Marte. We would talk about ideas on what the cover would be, and then next slide, please, until we get that final image. And we were discussing if it should be eyes wide open or should it be like in a state of dream, or the REM, because that's how you would remember your think of your memories. So we wanted it to be like dreamlike memories, and that's where this cover came to be. The idea of Strange Natives comes from my own personal journey of feeling like a stranger in your own native land. And this is because of a lot of years. I mean, I grew up with my grandparents who came from whose golden era was during the American period. And my grandfather was a photojournalist for Life and Time magazine. And my grandmother was one of the first female architects and graduates of the UST. So I grew up in an English-speaking household, and I was not allowed to read or watch anything local. So I grew up in an English-speaking household, studied in an English-speaking school, and as I got to the Philippine Household for the Arts, because two of my aunts graduated there, that was my first introduction to Filipino art and culture. And from my batch, I pursued writing. I joined the UP National Writers Workshop, the Ricky Lee script writing workshop, and I was still in high school. And when I asked Ricky what major should I take if I wanted to be a better storyteller, and he said, don't go to film because you won't learn how to tell stories there. And you take a liberal arts course. So I chose comparative literature. And because I had very poor Filipino skills, I took up comparative literature where I majored in Philippine literature in English. And I realized, I knew back then that, writing beautiful words and great ideas, but if there is no Filipino-ness, no historicity to your work, it just ends up as beautiful writing. So that's why I pursued studying Philippine studies in the Filipino department, where I had a lot of wonderful teachers like Ma'am Marot Flores, Chari Lucero, and and more. And that opened my eyes into peeling the colonial trappings, the colonial education of our, or miseducation of our history and our culture. And that's where that became the inspiration behind Strange Natives. So each character depicts a certain Filipino trait. Like this book is about Gracia, who has the ability to access memories, because I wanted to showcase on how much our culture forgets, and that's why it repeats in cycles. And that is the second book of the series. The first one was about a little boy named Francis, and he's the boy with Capi's eyes, because he does not have the ability to see our culture or our spiritual world. And he goes into the forest of this forgotten town of his grandmother, and he basically lashes out at the trees and the shrubs there, and pinaglaruan siya ng mga spirits. And that's and his penalty is one of the lead spirits took out the iris of his eyes that gave him access to see the spirit world. So it's mostly like that. That's why a big influence in my work is Gabriel Garcia Marquez, because it shows that magical realism side of our culture. And I do understand magic realism is a word created by the colonizers to explain our culture. But for us, it's what's magical is that it's real to us. We still believe in spirits. We believe in encantos. We believe in sumpa. We believe in all of these pre-colonial beliefs, and it's ingrained in us. We will not, if we don't believe it, we will not do anything to cause us harm by not doing it or by offending it, right? So
Right.
it goes back to that. Yeah. So that is this book. I think there are some sample pages. So this book was lucky to be a finalist at the 2017 National Book Awards.
Okay.
And this is Gracia's aunt, who is the last babaylan of their clan. And here she is doing a ritual.
Right.
Next slide, please. And then we have Gracia as a little girl, and she's watching her aunt, and her aunt catches her and says it's rude to stare, Gracia. Next slide, please. So the spirits help her along. They look like little duendes. So I'm watching Auntie.
Right.
Next slide, please. Okay, medyo maliit yung font, no? But okay, I'll do my best to read. So, if your grandmother finds out, if your grandfather finds out, he'll be very angry. I must not involve you in the old ways. And Gracia answers, but why can't I be like you, Auntie? And her aunt says, because Gracia, you must be white. Be white like the white man. Walk and talk like the white man. Believe what the white man believes. White as a symbol of purity and cleansing. Next slide. But that means I will be different. Even if I'm like you, I will be like them. I will be white, even if I'm brown. That's strange. We are all strangers, no matter how strange or strange, no matter how white, brown, or gray, we are all natives. Pieced together, we become familiar, we become whole. That is the fate deciding by the ruling gods. Some win and conquer, some lose and become forgotten. This is how we die in this world, when no one remembers anyone and anything anymore.
Right.
The invaders can kill our gods, replace our tongues, change our minds, but they cannot crush our spirit. Our spirit is strong, it carries on. For now, for how long, no one knows. But now, the old world ends with me, and the new world begins with you. And Gracia asks, can't I look back? I can always look back. You will not understand what you're seeing, what you're watching. Then I guess there's no harm then, since I cannot remember what I don't understand. Till the tides change, till the wind blows a different way. Never forget, never ever forget this day. So this is the how she teaches her niece the act of remembering. So it comes in the form of a butterfly, the wings of the beating of the butterfly. So that's how Gracia interprets this ability, and she asks, is it real? And it's as real as your memory of seeing it. So this book goes into the different memories of Gracia that happen across time. And there she shows how she can access it and go back to it. And this is my gift to you.
Wow.
It serve you well when you need it. Okay, so that is and Gracia thanks her auntie. I promise to never forget, never ever. Yes, Gracia, live long and happy because everything fades. But first, we must learn to live. We fade when there's nothing for us to live for. So live a long and happy life. Live. So I guess that's also, I think that's a very, and these are the character sketches of Gracia as a child, a young woman, and as her current state, which of an old lady. So I guess that's I think the artist's one of the artist's dreams is to live forever and to be
Word.
relevant forever, right? So
Right. Yes.
that's a dream that you made a difference, you made a mark in this world, and yeah, that's my
Paolo, I get it now why why Baguio feels like the place for you to write. Because I'm imagining Baguio as a setting, when you talk about your graphic novels, the themes, and because they have a lot of I guess ethnic cultures there that people take inspiration from, the highland culture, so which is full of spiritual and animistic beliefs passed on to one generation to another.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to do with the work, I was actually trying to imagine where this town is, because it's a forgotten town.
Yeah.
Something like vegan, but I know Bacolod and Batangas has these forgotten towns.
Yeah.
That so yeah, I might ask your help for some locations, because ideally it's right it's right in between the sea and the mountain, and
Right.
forgotten town. That's why it's protected. Gracia is the one who also protects. The reason why it's forgotten is because if there are tourists, she does that memory trick of hers that makes people forget that what they see, because there are a lot of forgotten gods in that town.
Yeah.
The next book that I'm writing is the story of the warrior, called Banal, and what's tattooed on his back is the mythology of the native land, and that's why he can't die. He's created by Bathala, and he's from bamboo and mud. And
Right.
metal nut that Bathala chose, he etched it as the mythology in the back of the warrior, and that's why he's fated to appear in every colonial
Narrative.
colonial. So and I guess it's also timely because our islands are also being invaded right now. So
Right.
so that's are they the new gods? Are they the new invaders? So that's also something that will be discussed. But yeah, it's
Right.
very uh
But
yeah. Go ahead.
but one word which kind of well, I caught to me when that you mentioned is this word of being miseducated, growing up. And I sort of can relate to that because I remember my earliest readings, well, comic books anyways, no, were American comic books. Diba? I'm sure you had the same, you were mentioning you had the same experience. Your family went to as far as, not allowing you to read local reading materials, I guess Tagalog comics or whatnot. So it's something very poignant to me because if I read history, especially the history of our country during the U.S. period, and Art Deco was specifically that period, then you really begin to understand how that miseducation, it's not really a new thing. It's been there since the time in the 20th century when we were under the US. And it's still, the sad thing is, it's still kind of ongoing right now, just by looking at the books that are displayed in the big bookstores that we have. I mean, how many percentage of that are in fact locally published books now? It's really more of a palaisipan for me, that it's still there. And I can imagine like kids today, those who speak English only, okay, do not even speak the local language or whatever language, and then they're reading all of these books which are, not, the content is not really local. It just makes me wonder where's this headed about in the next generation.
Not just during the American period. I mean, Marcos rewrote history, called himself as a hero, even if he
Right.
didn't go to the war. Dates back to your Spanish colonizers. They're the ones who, the friars, the Spanish friars, are the ones who documented and erased a lot of our historical sources. That's how you can't trace it back. The oral literature were documented by American and Spanish colonizers, and that's why when you see a text like that is created with or by them, even no matter how they claim to be objective, it's still from a foreign eye, from a colonizer's eye. And there is a reason why we were called brown monkeys during that time. I mean, if you look at General Arthur MacArthur's documentation of the Indios, if you look at Pigafetta and Magellan's documentation, it will always be seen as if we are an inferior race, and that's because they had an agenda, right?
Yeah.
So it's just about a re-education or appealing away at these things, because we don't have a Filipino, or there are very few Filipino sources that we can rely on. So we have to peel away at these documents that claim to be objective, because they aren't 100% objective.
Right. Well, I guess it's now that information is at our fingertips, and I would like to think we probably know better than we did 100 years ago. Then maybe it's now is the time to really, I guess, understand all of these sources from a very, I guess, contemporary and Filipino perspective, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to just, taking it verbatim as what they said 100 years ago. Things change and thoughts change, diba? So I mean, every generation would have a way of seeing things. I mean, what we're seeing right now may not be, the right, or at least what they saw 50 years ago. No, but it's times changing.
Okay, I think we only have 10 minutes left and we're only at the first part of our so baka
Mahabang kwento to. Okay, sige, I'll ask you a question. I mean, what challenges did you face in your creative process
um
in doing? I mean, let's say that Strange Natives or any of your books before.
well I had to make sense of that, of the whole idea of the facts, the data that I have is manipulated. So
Okay.
so how do I have that authentic, truthful narrative when the data is already manipulated? And that's why you see a lot of creators, a lot of writers, a lot of illustrators who try to recreate that and make it their own. So I guess it's taking away the issue on Filipino-ness, because at the very end of the day, we're all Filipino and whatever we create is Filipino. So and then it just matters on the degree of your miseducation or your
I guess, yeah.
if I mean
Or
if
your sense of need to be validated.
I mean we see people who recreate and reimagine Filipino things their own way. So
Yeah.
for me, you can't stop creators or authors from doing what they want, right? But at least have that authenticity in mind, that you did study, you did do your studies, and
Right.
and I can you repeat the question again? I kind of got lost to that.
I think I mean, what challenges did you encounter in the whole process, whether it's creative or logistical, or because doing a book is not easy.
Well, every step there's always something to learn other than the act of writing. I think that might be the easiest thing to do, but but I would say, because I went around it. I went from literature to film and TV to um to independent film, and then advertising, and then now comics. So I think what I do is in the past 20 plus years of writing, I was able to find the parallel of the things that do connect, because I did continue my literature studies on spiritual studies. So I studied pranic healing, and which is energy healing, and Kabbalah. So for me, what was amazing was that I was able to study the Torah from the point of view of the scholars, the Jewish scholars. So
Wow.
it's
Okay.
understanding what Adam and Eve means, what the Red Sea means, what Egypt means. So it's symbology, because it's not literal. I mean, we all know that it's not literal. So there are literal things in it, but it's not meant to be literal. I mean, that's where things become, different points of views, different arguments on what the Bible is. But
Right. Right.
but it's seeing, for me, at the end of the day, each book, each ad, because I did go through advertising, was a copywriter, worked my way up to as a creative director in 5 years. So but no matter what creative industry, as long as you write, all materials will have that message, will have that that lesson that you want to share to the world, and that's why you are creating it. That's why you are spending time, energy, talent to come up with this book. Whether it's a book, a film, or an ad, I mean, it all comes down to this process, that what lesson do you want to share to the world, and
Right.
it's a story that the world deserves to know. So it's just hitting on that one, because one story that if you read Ricky Lee's Trip to Quiapo, and I recommend, if you want to be if you're a writer, or you want to write, or you just want to learn how to write, Ricky Lee's Trip to Quiapo it's more of a self-help book, on writing. And there's this wonderful story that he wrote about it. Like, there are three writers. They all wanted to go to Quiapo. The first writer got the directions, followed it, arrived at Quiapo. The second writer got the directions, followed it,
Went to Binondo.
went to Binondo, went to other places, talked to different people, and then eventually found his way to Quiapo. And the third writer, who knew the directions but didn't follow it, he went through the mountain, down the river, etc., etc. He didn't get to Quiapo, but he made everybody believe it's Quiapo. And Ricky would always ask us and the batches after us, because I was batch 11, and I think right now there's batch 20 plus na.
Wow.
He would ask each batch, which writer do you think is the best? And of course, all of us would say it's the third writer. But over the years, because it's been like how many 20 years after taking his class, and then I would read it again, and I realized you need all three writers in you to come up with that book that you want to do. And that's the first writer represents logic. If you can't follow the logic, you won't follow the book, right? You go, that's so illogical, I can't follow it, so I'll stop reading. Okay, that's why logic is very important. But it shouldn't stop in logic, because the second writer was about play. It's not just about going through getting to Quiapo, but how you get to Quiapo is important. So if it's just logical, I already know the logic. I already went on this journey to Quiapo, so why will I go through it again? And that's why the second writer represents play, and that's why plays are called play, kasi yung laro, the creativity on making the journey different or fresh or contemporary. That's the second level. At the very least, to make it to a film or to a published book, you have to have the first two levels. Okay, but if you want to win an award or be relevant across time, throughout time, or be a bestseller, you have to reach the third level. And that's the third level of writing, which is represented by that third writer, is meaning. What is that lesson that you'd like to share to the world? What is that lesson that hasn't been shared before, or that's different or new, that places you at this time and space right now? And that's meaning. And if you go back again to why is art and literature called humanities, and it's all about art and literature being rich with meaning, and that's the clue. Mayaman sa kahulugan, mayaman sa rich in meaning. So that's the three things that I would recommend that you would have in your book or work: is logic, play, and meaning.
So you heard it from him.
Okay, how about your next slide, Ivan?
My next slide is, well, I'm just gonna answer the question that I gave you. What were the challenges of? Because my book is it's not literary in that sense. It's really more of it's design and documentation book. One of the challenges is basically, since it's a design book, but based on particular design history. So I had to be very careful with facts, right? And sometimes, when you do oral history, I mean, there's no really archival proof to it, so you have to take it with a grain of salt. And getting historical information is not as easy as going to the archives of a library, because for most part it's not there. And one thing I noticed documenting old houses or old buildings around the country is that we are not good at keeping records at all. No, I mean it's as simple as a family home built in the 30s. If I was gonna ask, okay, what would you have plans for it? Would you have this? Would you have that? Nada, zero. No, so we're not good at keeping records. So ultimately, one of the things that we can just rely on is oral history. But oral history can sometimes be very selective as well. No, I mean you only remember the good things. You don't want to talk about the bad things, so you also have to be careful with that. No, so I try to keep as a neutral tone as possible. So yeah, doing information research, at least with our book, was one of the bigger challenges. And that but the fun thing is that we're talking about the history of a part. I mean, this type of history is not really taught in school. No, when you learn about history, it's all about political history, like Jose Rizal, Andres Bonifacio, but you don't really learn history through design, no, at least not in a very academic way. So this is for me a very meaningful project because it kind of talked about a particular history of our country, but through the design expressions that people did in architecture, in graphic design, in furniture design. No, what were the influences? How did it came about? No, and in a lot of ways, it tells you our history during that particular period from 1925 to 1950, which is very very short, really, but very very poignant because that was the time that we were trying to assert ourselves as a independent country. Unfortunately, we had to go through a Second World War. So yeah, that was one of the key things that that I will remember doing Deco Filipino. Okay, so next, yeah, okay. So
we actually ran out of time. That is so interesting. Ivan and Paolo, we have a couple of questions, that burning questions, and people really would like to know. Number one, Ivan, so when you decided to come up with this project for your Art Deco book, is it something where the person that had they asked a question, I'm curious about the publishing side of writing, like
okay.
how do you know when and where you want to put your work out, right? And this timing and reception matter, specifically kind of like with what you're doing more historical and documentation, and you're doing more on fiction and all of that. So how does that, how do you work with that? And is it something that you go to the publisher first and say, hey, I have an idea, or is it an after you do your entire manuscript, Ivan?
Right. Well, for me, there's no specific set of time that you can do it. I mean, for me, basically, is that I applied for a grant for from the NCCA, National Commission for Culture and the Arts, which was basically to do a documentation of Art Deco heritage in the country. So after I did that, then that's when I began looking for a publisher, because doing a research is one thing. Keeping it in just a library, it's kind of sad. So you have to bring it out so that you share your research and information to others. And I was lucky that my publisher was very supportive because I already had the manuscript, and so just a little tweaking, editing, and all that. We just did it. Simple as that. Maybe it's a little bit
you, Paolo?
Yeah, different with Paolo.
Can you repeat the question, please?
When is the right time to really come out with like your work? Is it something that you talk to the publisher about, and you say, hey, I have this story, okay, and then you talk about when it's going to be published? Or is it something where they have an idea and then you roll with it? Like, how does that work?
In my case, there were no publishers. We didn't have any publishers. That's why the comics community is mostly self-publishers. So whatever we like to create, we just did it and then just publish it. If it gets a certain number of readers, we would save up to do offset printing, which is what I did for my book, Strange Natives. And because we were self-publishers, it was very hard to go through the DTI BAR, get the ISBN, register the NBDB, and so it has to be at a certain number of titles that, or you group yourself together and do it. So it's not, at least right now, we with Komiket, we grew the markets, we became a publisher. So at least we're one more publisher that focuses on comics. But but to answer the other half of the questions, how do you know when it's right? Well, I guess I would go back to what is your purpose? What is your soul, SOUL, your soul's purpose? So like Ivan, it's very clear. Art Deco is one of his, not his only purpose, but that's one of his artistic soul's purpose, right? So it's quite obvious now. Okay, because this is my expertise, I'll write it, right? So what we've been taught to, even before kindergarten, the three things that we're taught is to read, to write, to count, right? So based on that very kindergarten lessons, no, when we read, the more we know, the more that we're able to see. And what ties together all of what I'm sharing today, it's all about what you see. And that's inciting, whether it's a cultural insight, a personal insight, a product insight, or a categorical insight. So you'll be able to see things, right? And you'll able to see patterns, cycles, or maybe the reasons why things happen the way they are. And that's part of being trained to read. As we go through our courses in college, it's focused reading on history or study of man, or study of man's behavior, or literature, right? So we're able to see more. And then when you're able to see more, you'll have something more to write, right? So we have already the content. And now if you educate yourself and focus on the craftsmanship of writing, the sharper you get at writing. And that's why copywriting, you're paid to write for brands, but it can't just be writing in the brand's voice, but it has to be sharp, that it'll pierce through the consumers to induce them to buy the product, right? So whether that's a coffee or your book or your knowledge, that's the second part, writing and craftsmanship. So that's the second. And the burning desire of when you talk about counting, of course you're able to, as soon as you see, you write, and then you have so much wealth. Kasi nga, art and literature, it's richness, humanities, it's richness of meaning. So ang dami-dami, ang yaman-yaman ng sinusulat mo. And instinctually, we don't just want to keep it to ourselves. Like Ivan could have just kept all of his knowledge to himself, but he wanted to share it. And that's what counting is for. When you have so much knowledge, and you want to learn more and to get more, you share it. So when you share it, more people will have access to it, and you will have more sources, you'll have more connections, more opportunities, and you might be given more divine inspiration, since inspiration is one of the questions earlier, or one of the in the 15 seconds let's call it. But yeah, so that's read, write, and count. So that would be my answer, my short form answer to my long.
Paolo, can I get back to you on
Thanks,
that question, Charisse,
Sure.
with Paolo?
Sure, sure.
You mentioned something about, correct me if I'm wrong, about if you have enough numbers, then you go through offset printing.
Yeah.
So are you saying that, at least with your industry, you don't, when you publish, it doesn't necessarily have to be a hard copy.
It is a hard
Ganun
copy.
ba yan? It's a hard, okay.
Scenes. So when I started making comics,
Yeah.
that was 2012, and I think the Comic Con has been up since 2005, and the way that comics was produced back then was we'd go to the UP shopping center and
Okay.
we'd print it out, digitally print it out,
Mm-mm.
also known as Xerox.
Yeah,
And
we
then,
call it Xeroxiana in UST.
and we would print
Okay.
as little as 10 copies to as much as 200 copies.
I see.
And we'd sell it at the Comic Con, and that was the only place where we could sell it back then. So when we put up the Komiket, it was meant to grow more spaces. An art market would also be able to open up to other artists as well, so that we could grow the readership. Because if you like, maybe if you like a sticker or a postcard, you might like the comic book, because like all Filipino books, there's like a double force field there. Like for example, if it's easier for us to buy a foreign book than it is to buy a local book, and you would look at it, is it colonial mentality? Kinda is, but it's also traced to our American education that white is better, no? So it is colonial mentality, but at this day and age, we have access to so much already. We have access to so much books, Netflix, so many films, that our standard has to be at this level. So I will be open to buying a Filipino book if it's at this level. And there are a lot of books that are really, really good. As a Philippine Lit major, I've read a lot of great books. And of course, there are a lot of so-so books, but but there are a lot of great books. And that's why that's why I was saying we have a lot of female writers who are fantastic, like Chari Lucero, Rosario Lucero. I don't think her book is out anymore. It's called Feast and Famine. You were mentioning Hilda Cordero Fernando's published as a publisher, as an editor. So the soul book, the body book, I've been trying to look for the body book for decades. Wala na, unless it's sold at 4,000, 5,000 pesos. But yeah, it's so the readership could be 10 copies, could be 200 copies, and that's where your entrepreneurial skills will come in. Do you want to just use the money that you earn and go have some beer, or do you want to save it and earn enough to save enough until you can print it? And then being in the right place at the right time, and that's why the Manila International Book Fair is very, very important, because that's like the MMFF for books. It's the one time of the year where you can earn back your cost of production. And sadly, our MIBF last year was online, so it wasn't the same as because you could sell 100, 200 copies or more in just that event, and that could help you pay for a big chunk of the printing expenses. Because in the Philippines, it's already considered the bestseller if you sell 1,500 copies. But for a foreign book, it's 5,000. So you see that there are a lot of readers. They just don't read Filipino. But they will if somebody says that it's worth their money, it's worth their time reading. It's a very talented author. It's a very interesting topic. So is marketing part of it? A little, but again, we're kind of already used to PR that that you see on the newspaper, say that this is a good book, but we already know that it's PR. So it's not enough. It's not enough for PR. It's really about the spotting certain influencers who really has that capacity to say this is good and you should buy it too. And that's konti lang yung ganun na natin dito. But with the right people, and it's not just one influencer, it has to be a lot of different influencers that say this is good to get that viral effect. And sometimes the topics can go viral. I mean, last year there was a children's book that that was talking about, I think, showing that that this little boy calls his PP a titi. So like that. So automatically, unless it's something with shock value, diba? And not everybody kasi talks about, likes to write things with shock value, right? So sometimes, but it's hitting that viral level of contagious level of work. So either you build through it, or you gravitate towards that topic.
I sense a lot of similarities between the publishing and the movie making industry.
There are. I mean, you could just compare SM Cinemas with National Bookstore. It's the same.
Yeah.
I would say that the solution is also the same. If there is a government policy that says National Bookstore and SM Cinemas, you're required to have one cinema, one shelf dedicated to Filipino films or books, and have it mandated, required, maybe incentivized. Then they cannot pull out films. They cannot pull out your Filipino books, or pagsama mo si F. Shunil Jose with Wattpad, and and it's competing with furniture, for God's sake. How can you compete with stationery and pens? And I mean, that's but they need to do that to survive. I mean, it's not. This is also coming from the point of view of a reader, right? But of course, when you look at business, they have people to feed, they have livelihoods to support, diba? So it's also not fair to just say it's bad, But there are solutions to it. It just takes political will, and it just has to match. And I was telling Charisse this, the solutions that you're giving matches the problem. That's why it works. And that's very basic. Problems and solutions are opposites. I mean, it's beginnings and endings in storytelling are also opposites. So that's why they match. I mean, the only thing that doesn't match is climate change. The solution doesn't match the problem, because our solution, like intense weather, typhoons, we're not the cause of that. We're only 1% of the causing the carbon emissions, but we're the recipients of it, diba? So who's causing it? Of course, the first world countries with whose businesses are in fossil fuels, diba? So it's like, that's one thing that the problem and solutions aren't a match, because it's indirect. It's a web of indirect causes and effects. But this case, especially in business and publishing or film, publishing is just low risk, low gain. Film is high risk, low gain, unless you're one of the 5 families that rule the industry. So, but distribution wise, that's every creative industry's problem. All creative industries have a problem with distribution, and it's just like if we're wondering why are so many businesses folding, closing shop, well, because again, the solution is ayuda of 1,000 or 5,000, and it's the businesses that are folding. So that's one example where the problem and the solutions don't match, right? So well, it's called design thinking, no? But it's just to simplify, the problems and solutions should match for it to work. Because there are people that are willing to do the work, right? And that's the reason why I agreed to Charisse to doing this, because I believe in the work that she's doing, and she's just doing it for how many months? Wala pang 1 month, Charisse, tama ba? And that's
2
just
months, 2 months.
because your work will speak for itself. In 2 months, what are you able to do, diba? It's a matter of problems.
Thank you. Well, so we do, I mean, as we do want to solve all of these issues, and this is why we get all of you together, the authors, the publishers, the illustrators, to have conversations like this and just continue to collaborate. and keep the dialogue going and see what kind of solutions that we can come up with together, right? Because it's not just one person, it's all of us working together, and just trucking. So we have to end this conversation because we are over time. So I would like for you to plug in all of the kind of information. If people want to follow you, they want to buy your book, how can they contact you, Ivan?
Well, they can just look for me at Facebook. And we also have, it's part of, the book is just part of a bigger scheme of Art Deco appreciation and heritage. So we also have an Art Deco Philippines Facebook. So you can join that. It's free. And if you want to ask or inquire about the book, you can just message me at Art Deco Philippines.
Thank you, Ivan. Pao?
Okay, if you want to buy and support our local comics community, I placed on the chat the link to the Komiket bookstore. So we're available also on Shopee and Lazada. So if you're not from Metro Manila, you can get the books and it'll be sent to you. So we have titles from way back even in the 90s. We have the last few copies of the Visprint titles and some National Book Award winners. And if you want to learn how to write stories and even comic books, the 7th Comic Book Creators Workshop is this August. So I also sent the link on the chat. And you can, I'll be teaching that workshop.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you guys for joining us today. And again, I would like to plug in our next program, which starts, I believe it's next Friday. It's called Post-Pandemic Futures. The future is female. So we have a couple of awesome female publishers. We have Annie Almario, we have Reni Rojas, we have Sandra Padilla, we have Marianne Ordinario. So they'll be discussing kind of how they are leveling the playing field in the process that they're going through now, especially with COVID and what's going on with their publishing houses. So they'll be discussing that. And also we have a really cool book club coming up with Kuya Boji. And our first book that we will discuss is Bone Talk by Candy Gourlay. I hope I said that right. So again, hope you guys follow us. We are on Facebook and we are on Instagram, and we also have a website. So please follow us. And if you're an author, an illustrator, creative, a publisher, please register with the National Book Development Board. We have lots of incentives for all of you. And it is for free to register up until the end of the year. Again, thank you very much. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Paolo. And thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, Charisse.
Thank you, Charisse. Mm.